After decades of building a career, something unexpected happens. It isn't always financial. It isn't always about retirement. Sometimes it's simply not knowing what comes next. Hi, I'm Claire. Over the past 30 years, I've had the privilege of helping organizations navigate change across different countries. Like many of you, I'm now navigating a very different transition of my own. One that's less about career and much more about purpose. Recently, a conversation with my friend Dennis reminded me just how many of us are asking the same question. Dennis has had a successful career. He's exploring consulting because he still wants to contribute. He has decades of experience, strong relationships, sound judgment, a lifetime of lessons. Yet he admitted something that I suspect many of us quietly feel. I'm not quite sure where all of this fits anymore. That conversation stayed with me. At first, I thought we were talking about consulting. But the more I reflected, the more I realized we were talking about something much bigger. How do we redesign this next chapter of our lives so that everything we've learned, everything we've experienced, still creates value? Perhaps that's the real question many of us are asking. Not, can I still work? But what do I want the next 20 years of my life to look like? I think many of us start in the wrong place. We ask, what should I do next? A new job, consulting, a business, volunteering. They're all good possibilities, but I've come to believe they're not the first question we should be asking. Perhaps the better place to begin isn't with work at all. Perhaps it begins with the life we're trying to build, because once we become clearer about that, many of the other decisions become easier. Before deciding what you want to do, decide how you want to live. Do you want more freedom, more flexibility, more time with family, a chance to mentor, to travel, to keep learning, to contribute? I think our second act should support the life we want, not the other way around. One thing I've realized is that clarity rarely arrives before we begin. It usually grows as we take the next step. We try something, we learn, we adjust, and little by little, the path becomes clearer. Once we're clear about the life we want, we stop chasing every opportunity. We begin recognizing the ones that fit. Our experience starts to make more sense. We can see how each chapter has prepared us for what's ahead. As I reflected on this, I realized something. Once we're clear about the life we want, we begin seeing our experience differently. Because perhaps the greatest gift of our first career isn't the title we held. It's everything we've learned along the way. Experience has many forms. Sometimes it's technical knowledge. But more often, it's better judgment, better questions, greater perspective. The ability to remain calm when others cannot. Those qualities don't disappear when we retire. But there's one important truth I've come to appreciate. Experience alone doesn't create value. It creates value only when it helps solve a problem for someone else. That changed the way I began thinking about my own second act. I started asking, where can I genuinely help? Because every generation faces new challenges, new technologies, new uncertainties. Our greatest contribution isn't trying to compete with younger people. It's bringing perspective that only experience can offer. Over time, I stopped looking at these questions separately. Instead, I began looking at where they intersected, the life I wanted, the strengths life had already given me, and the problems I genuinely wanted to help solve. That's where meaningful opportunities started to appear. Of course, understanding this framework doesn't mean everything suddenly becomes obvious. It simply gave me something far more valuable, a direction. And once we have direction, we can begin taking meaningful steps forward. One of the biggest misconceptions I had was believing I needed to have everything figured out before I began. Very few people discover their second act sitting quietly in a chair, waiting for clarity. More often, we discover it by taking the next small step. Perhaps it's having a conversation, taking a course, mentoring someone, starting a small project, volunteering your time. You don't have to commit to a whole new future overnight. Think of it as running small experiments. Each one teaches you something about yourself, and each step brings a little more clarity than the one before. And once you begin discovering what brings you energy, what creates value, and what feels meaningful, protect it with simple routines. Because what we do consistently shapes the life we're trying to build. Whether it's setting aside time each week to learn, to create, to exercise, or simply to reflect, those small rituals quietly shape the future we're building. A meaningful second act doesn't happen by accident. It grows one intentional choice at a time. Before long, you're no longer wondering what comes next. You're already living it. When Dennis and I spoke again a few weeks later, he sounded different, more settled, more hopeful. There was a new sense of clarity, and with it, greater confidence to take the next step. If there's one idea I'd love you to take away from today's conversation, it's this. Your second act doesn't begin by first searching for another job. It begins by knowing the life you want. Recognize the strengths you've already earned, and look for where those strengths can create value for others. For some, that may lead to new opportunities. For others, it may simply mean investing more deeply in what matters most. Both are worthwhile. Both begin with living intentionally. I'd love to hear your story. Which of these 3 questions resonates with you the most? And which one do you find the hardest to answer? Share your thoughts in the comments below. One of the things I enjoy most about this channel is learning from one another, because every story shared here helps someone else realize they're not walking this journey alone. Thank you for spending this time with me. If today's conversation has encouraged you, I hope you'll join me again as we continue exploring how to build lives filled with true wealth, deeper wisdom, and lasting well-being. Until next time, remember, your greatest chapter is still being written.